Alrighty everyone, hello, and here we go again. Hi baby. Hi. Welcome back to yet another episode of my nonsense, and definitely also P-Lux nonsense. But as you can see, I got my laptop here again, not even because I got notes this time. Today we just have yet another case of Christians asking me to check out some ex-witch to Christian testimony to, maybe for the 5 billionth time, see if they can get me and see if they can, make me drop the whole witch part of Christian witch here, as you see in this title. Speaking of which, if you don't know who I am, welcome. This is apparently our first time meeting. Pleasure to meet you. My name is Sara Streisand, and I am a Christian witch, a content creator, writer, educator, specifically a writer of these two books right here, which are literally all about how Christianity and the modern understanding of witchcraft absolutely can, and continue to go together, and have for a long time. My co-writer Mimi and I have done a lot of work to, dig through the Bible in the socio-political context, the historical context, a lot of other background work. You will see very often just a slew of books on my shelves that have to do with exactly that kind of stuff, right? That have to do with that actual genuine archaeological, anthropological, historical scholarship, the theological scholarship, and theological frameworks that make this possible. And so those books are out there. It's like a one-stop shop, just getting your foot in the door, understanding basis. Yes, hello, welcome back. But if you are someone who's not, trying to, in these trying times, spend that kind of cash, I understand, and that's why these platforms that I have here exist. So go ahead and like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell, because we talk about stuff like this every single Friday. And I also have all kinds of free content on my other social media posts, right? Instagram, TikTok. I've got my own blog on my website full of posts that I do pretty much every other week on these topics, and then I've got some recipes as well. There's all kinds of stuff that you can check out here to learn a little bit. And if you do find that you want to support me and my work a little bit more, I appreciate you so much. You can actually do that by heading over to my Patreon, where you can get these videos 2 weeks early and ad-free, and a lot of other stuff too. Anyway, as always, all the time I get people coming into my comments telling me this, that, and the other thing about how Christian witchcraft is impossible, that I should look into all of these ex-witch to Christian testimonies, and we sure do get a lot. We sure do get a lot of people saying stuff like that. In fact, I have an entire few videos about reading specific books written by Christians who claim to be involved in witchcraft, or who claim to be against witchcraft, or that there's witchcraft lurking and waiting to destroy people. I've also looked into those to see what they have to say and to see if they have any leg to stand on. And just to give you a quick summary, they are currently like 0 for 4 on trying to convince me of anything. So, whoops. Yes, hello, Spimbage. Babbage! Why, baby? Oh, no. He's come to murder me. Anyway, so the thing is, right? I got this comment about this Craft to Christ channel, and it seems like she may have started on TikTok. Got quite the following on TikTok, and that is fine. Quick PSA before we go any further: do not harass this person. Do not harass this person. Do not go to their TikTok. Do not go to their YouTube. Do not go and bother them in any way. I cannot believe this is something that constantly has to be said in the year of our Lord 2026, that people don't know better than to not go and harass people based on a YouTuber or a content creator they like saying something about them. My God. Anyway, but started on TikTok, has all kinds of videos and playlists, about like truth about witchcraft and like all these other kinds of things, because this person, as the title might suggest, was apparently once a witch and is now a Christian. And she has a YouTube as well, and on that YouTube, the very first video she posted was one that seems to be clearly ripped from TikTok, and is one that's talking about some kind of like faith deliverance situation. She went to some event that was supposed to be like some kind of deliverance, healing, faith thing, and it was just kind of spooky and uncomfortable and bad, and it sucked.
Event, and straight away the pressure on my head, I thought, oh, I've got a heat stroke or something. It literally felt like I had a pole going through both temples and a squeeze on my head. And then I realized, witchcraft. I know what witchcraft is. I was a witch, and obviously since coming to Jesus, I know what witchcraft feels like on the other side.
Which, like, fair. Fair, right? That does sound like it would be a very uncomfortable situation based on her account. Notably, she says that she is a new Christian. In the time this video was uploaded, she says she's only been a Christian for a year and a half. That was 7 months ago. So we're going to say like a little over 2 years this person has been a Christian. Based on a few other videos I've watched, haven't been able to find one that's just about her direct, from witchcraft to Christian perspective, but it seems like she had a pretty common story. So I'm going to piece it together from a couple different videos, which were of interest to me. And this is basically what she's talking about.
So if I'm being completely honest with you, I had a life in witchcraft. I had friends, I had a business, I had everything pretty much sorted out. Yes, I was in absolute turmoil. I was being tormented, demonically tormented. Things weren't going great. But in a worldly sense, I had it all together. Okay, I had the fame online, I had a big following. I had the financial stability coming from witchcraft, and I had my friendships. So it doesn't make sense for me to throw that all away. I truly believe tarot reading near on destroyed my life, and I was a tarot reader and I had readings done on me. If you're a psychic medium, I need you to watch this video. I'm not going to tell you the full story because it's way too long. I used to speak to past loved ones. My brother passed away. I had spirit guides and I believed entirely that it was them, and it did break my heart when I realized it was.
So there you go, right? It seems that like most people, she was a witch for hire. She was into witchcraft. She had a following. She had money that she was making off of this stuff, and she, had all these clients and all this success and all this other kinds of stuff, and she didn't want to have been approached by God because that was spooky and it meant her whole life would be upheaved. Relatable. Anyone who has had some kind of, experience with God is going to have an experience of upheaval at some point. This is what we in the business call a tower moment, actually, because pretty much anyone of any walk of life, of any spirituality, is going to experience that. Person was making money. Person was, living life, having a good time, more or less. Had everything that I guess, society tells her she should have: the house and the assets and the notoriety, all these kinds of things. But she was not spiritually fulfilled. She was not happy. And Jesus eventually was like, "Hey, come on out, right? Get out of that and stop doing that." And then she made all of these channels and all these videos because apparently Jesus said, "Hey, do you want to go help everyone else get out of it too?" Okay, right? But the way she talks about this kind of stuff with being dead inside, with nearly leaving this world, sounds like to me like some serious depression, anxiety, something like that. I'm not a psychologist, nor am I qualified to give any kinds of diagnoses like that, obviously. But from my armchair opinion, sounds like probably she just wasn't very happy in that lifestyle. Okay, fine. So stop doing that lifestyle, right? It actually, if anything, it reminds me almost of St. Augustine. St. Augustine had a similar story in his Confessions where he's talking about how it took him so long to convert to Christianity because he, had all these nice things. He had all these accolades, right? Like he was a very celebrated scholar and and he was in the high society. And he really was struck when he found a beggar who seemed to be just happy as a pig and shit, honestly. Even though he was a beggar, even though he had nothing, he was still a jovial guy, just throwing blessings around on people. And that kind of really moved St. Augustine. And so, interesting, right? Everyone's going to have these kinds of things where, of course, the world is going to tell you what success looks like, and that's not necessarily what your heart or your soul actually wants, because the world's full of bullshit. As a Christian, which, operative word Christian, yeah, I could tell you the same thing. We've all had these kinds of experiences. We've all had these kinds of things. It is just odd, though, isn't it, that some of us are being told by Jesus to get out of witchcraft, and some of us have the exact same experience, but are being told to get into witchcraft. We could go back and forth about theories like that all day. I've made a few videos on different ideas, right? Like one of them just being that maybe just witchcraft isn't for you. Others being like, maybe it wasn't Jesus talking to you, and maybe it was just someone who looks like Jesus, known as the evangelical egregore. And based on where this lady keeps going to hang out and all these weird faith experiences and all this other kinds of stuff, and based on the other stuff that she says, this is, in my opinion, the more likely thing. She's running in circles that have heavy, heavy influence by a version of Jesus that doesn't make any sense. And her theology is not where it needs to be as a result. Her theology doesn't really smack of any actual scholarship or learning. Her theology has not yet done the spiritual algebra proofs to understand the things she's saying. And we see that when she says stuff like, the Bible is the truth. No. The Bible is not the Word of God. The Bible is not the truth. The Bible points us to the Word of God. The Bible points us to the truth. The truth being Jesus, right? Jesus being the way, the truth, and the life, the logos of God that transcends any concept of just one guy and is something much bigger than that. But that's neither here nor there. We'll get into that another time. Point is, this person says a lot of interesting stuff, and based on our conversation last week about the Satanic Panic, I found this video in particular extremely interesting. Because this video hits all the points that I'm warning against in my last video, right? Saying that, oh, well, look at the files, right?
And that's a whole different ritual. And I don't really want to go into detail about why they look so young, but I think a lot of you know it begins with an A. And with the recent files that have come out, this confirms every conspiracy theorist, every person that has been speaking about this, it absolutely confirms that indeed this has been going on.
That are coming out right now with all these powerful people. All of them worship Baphomet. All of them worship Baal and Satan and all these other things. Look, in Hollywood, these are humiliation rituals. Hollywood's full of satanic people and just full-on conspiracies and nonsense. And a weird othering and scapegoating of people that gives me serious pause about this person and like where their theology is, where their spirituality is, and who the hell it was contacting them claiming to be Christ to begin with. This doesn't mean every single thing she says is completely off base. I've watched a few of her videos, right? Like on some of her TikTok videos. Yeah, some of them are totally right.
Signs your church is actually doing witchcraft. Yeah, never a video I thought I'd ever have to make, but yeah, they're doing it. Got this comment yesterday, and I've had a few comments like this. So this lady in this comment is talking about how a faith leader, which I soon found out to be a pastor, was telling her to put her ex's name into a black candle and then burn it down. Recently looked into some of the prosperity gospel, which was basically like, you know, calling on Jesus for certain amounts of abundance and writing the figures that they needed down and putting it under their pillow. You know, this is witchcraft, right?
Whatever pastors these are going around talking about how they're using like fucking black candles with people's names on them. Yeah, that is what we'd call witchcraft. Or doing like prosperity gospel spells. Like, yeah, that is witchcraft. And as Christian witches, like, you can do ritual work with God and you can ask him for certain things or work with him on certain things. I think what irritates me about that as a Christian witch is that these are the people who are going to talk about everything's demonic, how everything is evil, and then they're also going to just be on some tomfoolery because they don't have any spiritual basis, understanding, or you know, proof work behind the stuff that they talk about. So they end up talking out of two sides of their mouth, basically. Everything's witchcraft, everything's demons, but also, wait, but when I do it, it's fine. You really cannot have your cake and eat it too in that regard. You have to kind of call a rose, you know, and just kind of deal with the fact that, like, you're doing Christian witchcraft. Congratulations. Granted, it's still Christian witchcraft that's very irresponsible and very kind of disconnected from the actual background theological processes, which is what we're trying to do on this channel, get some decent stuff down, but it's still just like, what are we talking about? So I've got the laptop again because we're going to take a look at some other videos and see just some more, because I've only done a cursory glance, and even then what I've seen already is not great. But so she's got this warfare prayer, right? This is my personal favorite spiritual warfare prayer. And the problem is, right, this book she's holding, this warfare prayer, so she's got it in the link in her bio for free. Okay, great. The thing is about these prayers, though, is that this is what my, as a Christian witch, spells look like. So she's going to talk about these pastors doing their witchcraft, which by all means they are, right? They're doing candle magic and like whatever. This is also spell work, honey, because witchcraft and magic encompass a lot of these things now that once upon a time, witchcraft didn't cover. Way back in the day when the Bible was talking about witchcraft, they were talking about very specific practices that are not at all what witchcraft has come to mean now. The stuff that she's doing here and that she's also talking about these, you know, churches doing, ironically, are also stuff that our own ancestors used to do against witches, that priests and bishops and popes used to do against excommunicates or other people that were just like awful sinners to the point of needing to be excluded from a community, and also just stuff that people were doing in order to get by in very tumultuous times, to call on God for help. So this lady with her, I don't know, book of spells back here called God's Got It. Let's go look at this book for a second, right? It seems to be her own book that is free. It's a free ebook. It's a free book in general, one file. So thank you for supporting my mission and tearing down the stronghold of the enemy against the children of God. I pray this helps you take back ground and align your mind with Jesus. The ultimate source of truth is the Bible. What did we just talk about? So please remember not to dismiss the gospel for other sources entirely, okay? A simple little guide to letting go and letting God make the moves in your life, allowing you to live in peace, security, wonder, contentment, and even excitement. Combining therapeutic techniques, psychological insight, and ultimately the power of prayer and following Jesus. Okay? Fun. If you feel ready, take it. Anyway, we have 3 enemies: the devil, the world, and ourselves. Formatting leaves something to be desired, but that's all right. Anyway, so the devil, we've already talked about the devil, right? Last time especially, we talked about Satan as not this enemy, but also as God's prosecutor in the great divine court. This book specifically talks a little bit about that, and talks kind of about more like how it is that we got from Satan being kind of like an employee of God's to an enemy of God's. Very interesting. Very typically, here we go. We've got some things like John 8:44, calling the devil the father of lies, prowling around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour, right? And these scriptures right here is what we're referencing. Great, these are New Testament things. These are like just centuries and centuries after original ideas of Satan come around, right? And any kind of adversary. We see the adversary show up in other places like in Joshua, or in other places that are referencing the prophet Joshua, like this one right here. We also see references to Satan, obviously, in the book of Job, where Satan and God make a frickin' bet together, like they're playing fantasy football, right? And just totally destroy this man's life, just to see what happens, just to why not, right? So there's a lot of places where this kind of thing comes around. And there are lots of other demons by specific names that show up in other books too, King Asmodeus being one. There's all kinds of interesting spirits that come around and do whatever the hell they're doing, right? Outside of the whole God-Satan dynamic to begin with. But right, okay, so basically the devil, which is always some scapegoat that people are othering their issues onto. The world, which, right, the world always tells us a bunch of bullshit about what looks good and powerful and right. This is kind of like the point of the gospel story in the first place. And then ourselves, which, right, the flesh and all this kind of other stuff. But Jess here is a therapist and an ex-witch. Been a therapist for 7 years. Cool, great. So I'm assuming this person is licensed to do this kind of stuff. That's great. I don't know why all of this is in center fucking justification. Please, this is not how we format ebooks. But then not all of it is either. Some of it is... Okay. This is talking, again, a lot about like psychology stuff, letting go of worldly desires, all these kinds of things. Okay, again, a lot of therapy stuff, seeing through temptations, the officer of Satan. Temptation rarely looks like evil. If it did, most of us would run the other way immediately. It looks reasonable. It sounds comforting. It feels familiar. It can be exciting. Satan does not usually show up with chaos at first. He shows up with shortcuts, relief, control, and power that feels earned. Okay, sure, but here's the problem. When I'm reading this, and I'm looking at especially this video about exposing Satanism or whatever, every time she's saying stuff like this, that it's like, comforting, that that people are getting kind of wrapped up in it. If I closed my eyes to the title and I didn't know what she was talking about, I would assume she was talking about a lot of mainline evangelical churches, like specifically the mega churches, right? The ones that siphon endless amounts of money off of people and have such bad spiritual math that it gets people all kinds of screwed up. It offers people every possible way out of the basic truth of Jesus' 2 commandments that he gave people: love God, love one another. And that's where, especially in, right, the separation of church and hate, we see this a lot, that people constantly try to either go back or go forward and just skip Jesus altogether to make a lot of weird arguments to justify their hatred and abuse of other people. Again, like I said in my previous video on the Satanic Panic, there's a lot of people trying to project their actual issues out onto some Satan, some enemy, some devil, when in reality, the call is coming from inside the house. And I don't see anything different about this person when I look at this book or when I look at this YouTube channel. There we go, one quick Control F later, and we finally find it like 41 pages deep. All right, my whole financial security was because it was based on New Age practices. I was terrified, but I did it, right? To give up that business God told her to give up. Anyway, 2 years on, I haven't once been without. God has provided the whole way. And even now, new offers are coming in. His plan was perfect. And I'm finally doing the right thing after running a business in the devil's kingdom. Okay, another testimony came from someone leaving New Age practices. She believed she was hearing divine guidance through manifestation and signs when she surrendered those practices and asked God to lead her instead. The clarity felt quieter, but safer. That language brings a lot of red flags. So I'm actually going to maybe take this book aside for my own on a different thing. This looks like something that's actually very, very fun and interesting that I personally would like to look at a little bit deeper. Right now we're more focusing just on this person in general and focusing on their content. So like, right, things that are actually demonic from an ex-witch. This should be interesting. Let's see what she thinks is demonic as an ex-witch.
I'm going to tell you exactly what led me into witchcraft and what you need to stay away from. And believe me, some of these things you'd have no idea about. Absolutely anything that tries to tell your future. Anything. Even if something as stupid as those little 8 balls. Me personally, I started really understanding my gift of future by using tools like playing cards and things like that. If you come across something that tries to tell you what your future is, that is not of God. And actually it's on a...
Okay, so not demonic per se, just not something God's a fan of. God's not a fan of spoilers. Mostly because when you are doing future telling, what you're actually doing is giving up on your free will, right? And this is something that, whether it's astrology, whether it is any kind of other divination outside of God, right? A lot come up in the Bible where, you know, prophets are goofing on people for like trying to read the fucking clouds to figure out like if they're going to have a good harvest or not or something. The reason this is an issue is, first of all, because God can kind of shake it up in any time. He can just decide to do things differently if he wants at any time. The world he's writing is basically one big draft, and it is always editable. And the second is that if you are told, like, hey, no matter what you do, this is what's going to happen to you. Hey, no matter what goes on, no matter how hard you try, you're never going to change from what you are. That denies us the agency God gave us, right? People use that to act like, oh, it's going to happen, so I don't have to do anything. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to act myself. Or, they sit down in despair, like there's nothing I can do. This is what it is. Denies us our agency. But even in like Judaism and in Christianity later on, astrology absolutely played a large part. I was actually just watching this very interesting video from Esoterica about a bishop, I believe, who was very much kind of talking about how these cosmos do, in fact, influence the world, but that we still have free will overall. There's a lot of stuff like that. And it's in Judaism and Christianity where maybe the cosmos, because God does move the celestial bodies, has an angel choir dedicated to doing that. These heavenly bodies, they do exert some influence, but we have free will. And so they're not fatalistic. And that's the problem with astrology that people were having with, especially Babylonian astrology. Babylonian astrology was fatalistic. It said if you have this stuff going on in your birth chart, or if the stars are this way, there's nothing you can do about it. Judaism and Christianity deny this just out of hand, categorically. They say, well, maybe they can influence, and maybe you can kind of use that to your advantage. And maybe even because they kind of seem to show a pattern of nature, you might predict the future in the same way that you might predict that the crops are going to die when winter comes back, right? It's a cycle. You're not a prophet or some kind of, medium or psychic when you say that, hey, come winter, the temperatures will drop below freezing. You know what I mean? Like it's a natural rhythm that we might observe instead. Even then, not always guaranteed to go that way. You might have a warmer winter, you might, whatever. So that's the kind of thing going on there. But future in general, like, not a lot of people are actually doing that with witchcraft. I don't feel like. There are some people who want to know and who are going to ask silly questions. Like, oh, when will I get a boyfriend? And it's like, I don't fucking know. Have you worked on yourself enough to deserve a boyfriend? Are you a kind and stable person? Do you have your affairs in order? If you don't, then you shouldn't be asking about when you're getting a boyfriend. You know what I mean? But hold on.
It's on a mission to deter you from God's plan. Alcohol, the biggest one, without a doubt, alcohol. There is a demon named alcohol. This demon talks about the absence of the soul, removing the soul from the body, and then allowing a demon to inhabit the body.
Yeah, because one of Jesus's famous miracles at the wedding of Cana was just turning that water into a really nice poppin' Welch's grape juice. What the fuck do you mean there? Okay, nope. What do you mean there's a demon called alcohol? These people really will be coming up with anything. They will be coming up with anything, just saying some stuff. But this is what I'm talking about, right? When people recommend these kinds of channels to me, we are quickly becoming 0 for 5 because, once again, these people don't have the theological knowledge. They don't have the study. They don't have all of this. They just start going on, making up crazy nonsense. Like, does the Bible speak against drunkenness and being a sloppy mess? Yes, obviously. If you are constantly drunk and being sloppy, that's a problem. But wine is a frequent thing that pops up in the Bible as a good thing. Wine is a part of, Passover feasts, right? On the table of the Passover feast, wine is what the body and blood of Christ comprises of. Wine was at the Last Supper. Wine is one of Jesus' miracles. There is nothing wrong with wine.
Allowing a demon to inhabit the body. Every single time in my past that I had a drink, I would be spiritually attacked to the next level. And even my friends as well, if you have a hangover, it's more than just a hangover, isn't it? You literally want to exit the... Alcohol is without a doubt one of the most demonic things on the planet. You could also argue that's why a lot of it is called spirit. Wine I feel slightly different about, obviously, is mentioned in the Bible quite a lot. Anything that leads you to intoxication or that you are not in control of your own body, demonic. This goes from...
Wait, what? How is wine an exception? How is wine an exception? Oh, but that's what the other ones, these are called spirits, but wine... Girl, is beer an exception too then? Because that's not called a spirit? Hold on. Is wine a spirit? Right, so spirits are... No, wine is not considered a spirit. Spirits are much stronger due to the distillation process, with alcohol content typically starting about 20 ABV, according to Thousand Oaks and Barrels. Thank you, buddy. Yeah, literally the only difference is the distillation process. It's just more alcoholic, which means you just need to have less of it. Why do people just come on this internet and say shit?
This goes for a lot of medications as well. I'm not going to speak too deeply on that because, free speech and all. Anything that makes you feel like you are not in control of your own body, demonic doorway. Forms of thought control, and you'll be surprised at this. Absolutely anything or anyone that tries to prevent you from thinking, asking questions, delving into things. The people in charge at the moment, if you catch my drift. The process of cognitive thinking was God-given for a reason. Absolutely anything that tries to stop you thinking or having your own mindset.
Literally just demolished a large chunk of, Bible Belt type Christianity with that one. Also, what do you mean medicate? This is someone who claims to be a therapist?
That is completely and utterly demonic. That's where cults come from, because everybody has to have the same belief system. You'll notice this is why I go absolutely ham on specific Christians that don't let people ask questions about anything demonic. This one's gonna run.
As you should, but we're quickly coming into a problem here where everything is demonic, including other Christians. Everything magically somehow manages to be demonic, okay.
Ruffle some feathers, but the generalised school system. I don't need to go into too much detail there, do I? I'm just going to say one word: indoctrination. And also
No, you should go into more detail, because what do you mean? What is the indoctrination? Science? History? Math? Literature? Irritating. I'm irritated, and I feel like I've seen enough. But let me just also hold up this video for you, this video where she's talking about tarot cards. Again, I've seen enough. Because this person now is talking about how, when you're doing tarot on people, you're speaking curses into people's life because you're telling the future, and basically, it's not that any of this stuff was going to happen or was going to come true, but it's that when you accept a tarot reading, it becomes true. What are we talking about? First of all, anyone who actually does tarot knows that this is a more contemplative situation. This is not exactly a tool used for telling the future to begin with. It's not like, you pull the Three of Swords and, oh boy, there you go, you're going to experience heartbreak. No, it's more like this is trying to tell you something about the situation you're already in to help you reflect on it and kind of figure out your own methods around what's going on. More importantly, tarot is a language, but God himself has given divination tools that act more like a pendulum than anything else, with the Urim and Thummim, these things that act as a yes or no answer from God. People, specifically the priests, they'd use this when they couldn't agree on what the interpretation of the law meant. So if they couldn't butt their heads together and say, it means definitively one thing, the priest would ask God to clarify. Does it mean this or does it mean that? Cast the lot, whichever one comes out is whichever one it is, right? One meant yes and one meant no. So God has tools to divine with, to do divination with, to ask him questions. Tarot is just a much more complicated version of those tools. Rather than just a yes or a no, you can get a verifiable few paragraphs of a more complicated and, conversational answer if you learn how to speak that language. So these kinds of ideas, when she's saying this is what happens when you do tarot, it tells me that she had no idea what she was doing. She had no idea what she was doing, right? We have yet another case of, as Jesus would say, the blind leading the blind. As a witch, doing goofy things, now as a Christian saying goofy things. And she's got other videos like this too about, you know, how to spot witchcraft in your yard, how to this, that, and the other thing, right? Like, these are witchcraft attempts on your home. Okay, what are they?
Outside the front of your house, it's probably witchcraft. Just a heads up, these are real photos, okay? So if you don't want to see photos of witchcraft, scroll on by. First of all, probably one of the most common is anything to do with animal bones or feathers, particularly if they are aligned in circles or hung on the door knocker. Very strategically placed, usually hexes, curses, quite nasty ones as well. Secondly, dolls. They can be heads of dolls or full dolls, homemade dolls, very strategically placed as well. They won't just be left there by a child, and they will have some kind of carving on them, maybe anointed with some form of witchcraft oil.
Every time I think I'm gonna have a cute moment with this stuff, every time I think I'm gonna have a ha-ha tee-hee giggle, I get so irritated, so frustrated. Why? Because, again, I read books, and all the stuff she was just describing, they come up in actual court records of the church for accusations of witchcraft against innocent people who would later be put to death for things that they did not do. That's what makes me so upset, is that in this nonsense about you're going to find bones in your yard, you're going to find doll heads with stuff carved into them, very Hollywood bullshit sounding magic, my first place my brain went to was these cases I've seen of people accusing someone of putting witchcraft on them, ooh, spooky, because they happen to find like a bone in their yard or a broken eggshell. Mind you, specifically in rural fucking Slovenia, where everyone was a farmer. Yeah, sure, yeah, there's no other reason you'd find a bone or an egg in your yard than witchcraft, I guess. And those accusations led to real people being harassed, being threatened, being tortured, being beaten, and sometimes being killed for witchcraft. And this is why I have such a problem with this. When I'm listening to her talk about how all the elite in Hollywood are Satanists and how, you know, this ring of terrible people, you know, with the Epstein files are all Satanists. When I hear about, you know, how all of this is demonic, public schools are demonic because they're indoctrination, and alcohol is demonic because it's some magical spirit named alcohol. When I just very gently leaf through her free ebook that she posted, and it's just full of badly formatted, badly written, he said, she said nonsense. Even just trying to piece together her testimony felt like I was friggin' mining for gold, for one thing. But second of all, you know, all the stuff she says about how, you know, the people are looking for worldly, you know, measures of power, right? How she thought that her platform wasn't going to go anywhere when she's talking, ironically, about our ex-witches to Christians grifters, when she's talking about, you know, all this nonsense about how, well, you know, both Christians and New Age people grift. Yes, of course, we agree there. Everyone can grift. And she's talking about, well, see, I do all this for free, and, you know, I had a big platform, and then I gave it all up, she says on her 53,000 subscriber platform, on her 333,000 subscriber TikTok. Yet, to me, it just sounds like, hi, you replaced one source of validation for another. You misled people one way, and now you're misleading people another way. Not because maybe you're trying to. Craft to Christ, if you're watching this, maybe it's not because you're trying to. Maybe you genuinely believe this stuff. The problem is that you are still doing exactly what you said you were doing. So I see that there is, you know, an attempt here to try and do things correctly. I see that there is an attempt to maybe atone for what you thought you had to atone for. And surely there are some things that if you really believed what you did about, say, like tarot or any of this other stuff, yeah, goofy, I will admit. But theologically, I'm not seeing any sound substance here. And more importantly, the stuff that you are saying, the conspiracies you are spreading, they are the same kind of irresponsible, poorly educated takes that are going to hurt people, that already historically have hurt people. I am not amused by this kind of stuff. I am not interested in people, whether they, out of what they think is the goodness of their own heart or to turn a quick buck, are out here going to use the name of God to once again get people all screwed up and still prey on people who are afraid, who are confused, who don't know what's going on, to then try and turn them around and tell them that God says that any of this that you're saying is good. One might accuse me less of being a witch and more being an atheist at this point, but I say that unless what you are saying about God, the Bible, or anything has some kind of backing, has some kind of actual theological bones behind it, that maybe you probably shouldn't be saying this. And this is another problem I constantly have with these kinds of folks who are always coming around making platforms and getting up and talking after just converting to something, after just leaving something, is that they don't have any of this study behind them. They don't have the knowledge that is required to make the arguments that they're making, to say the stuff that they're saying, and that's why now everybody is confused. Yeah, Biobi, tell them. Like, and when I look at her page again, is that witchcraft on you? You weren't attacked because something was wrong with you, healing trauma with that. You're being attacked because other people, and this is another thing she said in one of her, in her satanic panic video over there, is that it's just like, people who try to leave the occult are always getting attacked and blah, 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 and this and that and all that. No, dude, this is fear-mongering. This is nonsense. This is other people coming to their own conclusions about what they're witnessing before them and speaking on it. And of course, the internet's full of ugly, hateful people, and they're going to just say stupid shit. But like, all of this rhetoric is extremely, and I do mean extremely, irresponsible. And for someone who claims to be a therapist and saying all these kinds of things, to say that medicine is a problem, to say that school is a problem, to say that, you should question things, and I don't like Christians who say not to question, but then just go and repeat the same misinformation that they repeat about, like, other people, about spiritual practices. It's crazy. Every single time I've ever encountered an ex-witch to Christian, and I listened to even a scrap of the stuff that they claimed was witchcraft that they did, I'm like, well, no wonder you were screwed up. You were out here believing exactly what Christians believe about the stuff that you were doing. You were out here believing all of this nonsense about, you gotta tell the future, and like, all these spirits and all this demonic oppression and blah, blah, blah. You were out here still believing all that stuff as witch, even if you were saying that you didn't. And then you admit to that later when you go back to Christianity, and it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't, why would you? Okay. So, yeah, so far, what I have seen is more than enough for me to determine that this person, with all of her goofy thumbnails, and, all of this kind of stuff, and trying to send this free book out, which she says is proof that she's not a grifter, because, if she were a grifter, she'd be making money off this, but she's not. She's just trying to spread the good word, and that's why she made all her stuff free. Yeah, okay. Right? Sure. Person with a huge following, getting all kinds of, people gassing you up in your comments and everything else. She can make all these kinds of claims all day long about how she's trying to help people. The fact is, it's like, well, just because someone wants to help doesn't mean that they know how to help. And this is a clear example of that. This is, in fact, someone who wants to help and makes it worse. So, if she genuinely enjoys her life better as a Christian than as a New Age witch person, whatever, that's awesome. Good for her. I'm glad for her. However, you can't just go and tell people that witchcraft is bad when you yourself don't know what it is, as is made patently obvious by how you don't know how tarot works, by how, okay, you're talking about how randomly finding doll heads in your yard might be a sign that you've been cursed. What the hell what is wrong with you? Genuinely. Big ol' mess and a half. Anyway, so thank you to the person who suggested this to me. Let me know in the comments below if you want me to dig even deeper into that free book that she has. I did, since it is free, I did just go grab it. So if you want me to actually go ahead and read that cover to cover and bring my deeper thoughts on it, let me know. But nope, from a cursory glance with the bibliography of books I have in the back of my mind, nope, this is another one of those cases where even if she was being 100% honest and truthful and earnest about everything she said, it doesn't make what she's saying correct. It doesn't make what she's saying helpful. It certainly doesn't make what she's saying any different than any of the shit we've ever seen before in history that has caused serious strife and pain. So all I gotta say, y'all, is you desperately need to, as Christians say, be discerning. You need to be discerning about who it is you're listening to, where it is they're getting the information from, how the hell they know anything that they're talking about, and so on. I am never shy about telling people where I get my information from, where I get my theological ideas from, where I get, all of my scholastic citations and sources from. This is something that I believe very deeply in, is academic and informational transparency. So do with that what you will. But for the most part, I need y'all to learn what this lady says she wants you to do and actually question things. Think for yourself, find information, and not only information, but good information. Okay, don't just read any, crappy nonsense source you find after you Google something. Vet your sources. Make sure that the people writing the things you're reading are qualified, that they have studied this stuff, that what they're saying can be cross-referenced and verified by other sources and peers in their field, and all of these other things. Please do not just go listen to the words of anyone on the internet, not even me, okay? Again, this is why I post my sources. Don't even just listen to me out of hand. Go find the sources. Go look at the stuff that I am citing, and go make your own opinions. Learn how to do your own research. And not just like in a goofy internet, conspiracy do your own research way. In a genuine of like using the crap test and learning how to vet sources and get scholarly stuff to tell you what's going on. Learn how to actually read the big heavy theological books. Learn how to situate yourself with the saints, with actual scholarship about people like Paul, who wrote a good chunk of the New Testament, and all these other things. Learn how to do this so that you don't get just dragged around by people calling medicine and public school and alcohol fucking demonic. Oh my goodness, I can't believe this. And it really does make me feel like the whole thing about being a Christian witch specifically is so that I can stand in the middle of the road and so that I can look at both people who are in New Age, whatever, and all that nonsense, and people who are in Christianity, and people who have just jumped the boundary between them like a freaking jump rope, and point out all the places in which they are still doing the same exact thing as each other, just in a different font, which is, prey on vulnerable people, spread misinformation, and posit themselves as leaders when they have not earned the qualifications to call themselves that in any regard. So, no, watch out. And I will see you guys next time for some more good chats, but do let me know if you want me to talk more about this person specifically. I know that now brings us up to 2 books we got to look at now. It's 2 of them that we need to take a peek at and see what's going on. Nonetheless, we also have so much other stuff to talk about as well. So I will see you guys next time, but until then, let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you later. Goodbye.